It is a resort town in Guatemala next to the world-famous Lake Atitlan. Irishman Paul Farrell arrived here to the Central American country in 2003. He worked as a cook in a number of restaurants, including the Yukon Grill. Soon after, a group of US evangelicals called the Solomon's Porch opened up a restaurant on the floor above. Here they held Bible classes for local children. Soon after, the authorities started investigating local expats at the Yukon Grill, including Paul. I understand, Eve, that there was a lot of suspicion over foreign men a number of years ago of a bar called the Yukon Grill. Would you have been aware of that?
Considering our first Solomon's Porch was immediately over the Yukon Grill, and I'm looking at the location now, yes, we were quite aware of the Yukon Grill.
But there were suspicions that things were happening in the back room, I'm told.
I would say so.
Were you aware of that?
That was news to me. I only found that out afterwards, but as far as I was concerned, nothing like that happened. There was a tiny little place and the toilet was absolutely tiny. You couldn't get more than one person in there.
In Panajachel, many young girls walk up and down the main tourist street selling handicraft or food made by their family. Many foreigners either buy their goods or help them out with money. One such local girl whom Paul was friendly with was Milagros Morales.
Sí, me compraba los rellenitos porque mi mamá, antes mi mamá me pegaba si yo no llevaba el dinero en la casa y Paul me ayudaba en ese sistema. Me compraba los rellenitos.
As well as that, some people would help him out, trying to get him, if they thought they needed any medical treatment, get him glasses.
Paul ayudaba a muchas chicas, muchos jóvenes en ese momento.
Bueno, algunas amigas que yo le presentaba a Paul. Él tenía amigas que vendían también.
Rumours started to build up about Paul and Milagros after she was taken in one night by the Solomon's Porch. Her family and Paul went looking for her everywhere the next morning and had the local radio and TV stations announce she was missing. Later that morning she was found in the home of the owners of the Solomon's Porch. And you took her in, Daddy. You remember that?
Yes.
Esa noche estaba bien asustada porque no tenía dinero. Yo fui en otra casa, en la casa de Lloyd. Yo pensaba que ellos me iban a prestar dinero, pero ellos me dijeron que ya no me fuera. Entonces ahí fue donde yo me quedé y ya no salí.
She stayed in your house that night, as far as I understand. And the following day, a third person came to the house, possibly a lawyer, and asked Milagros a number of questions about Paul Farrell.
You know what? She actually talked to a friend of ours, and then we got a hold. The IJM did come in, which was a relief to me. And so they're going to come in, and they're supposed to be a respected organization and handle it. To me, it was a godsend.
The IJM, or the International Justice Mission, is an evangelical organisation with headquarters in Washington, D.C. It describes itself as a human rights agency that rescues victims of sexual exploitation and slavery. It is funded by big-name donors including Google and the Bill and Melanie Gates Foundation.
Pues la mayoría de ellos, de los misioneros que vienen con la idea de traer un conocimiento más amplio del Evangelio, o sacar a las personas de una manera de vivir. Algunos apoyan y otros absolutamente no apoyan, sino que hay otros que se escudan tras de lo que es el Evangelio, pero no son verdaderamente personas de fe.
Our local support is important for them. Their battle is done at home, and their donors are government and big business. Key to their campaign is showing they are making a difference on the ground in countries like Guatemala.
We were the only people with balls enough to try to do anything, pardon my French. Paul has a reputation of being a pedophile. Undeserved or undeserved, that's his reputation, not just from this case.
El abuso de niños y niñas acá en Guatemala es un problema gravísimo, no únicamente en la capital, sino en todas las comunidades. Aún no se ve como un problema. Es un abuso muy escondido que no ha logrado el gobierno ni las organizaciones poderlo colocar como una problemática a nivel nacional.
Milagros denied there were any relations with Paul, and the IGM didn't pursue the case. Weeks later, Paul's relationship with another local girl came under the spotlight. She was the younger sister of a local girl who worked in the hotel where the Irishman stayed. ¿Cómo conociste a Paul Farrell?
Esa vez yo estaba trabajando en el hotel, en eso él alquiló una habitación y ahí fue cuando nos empezamos a conocer.
And her younger sister, She used to come in and she'd blip off to the shops and buy beer for the people staying there.
Ahí como tenía tele, aquí no teníamos tele, mi hermana iba a ver tele con él.
Paul Farrell was a helpful person in the community. He was seen actively taking part in the relief operation after Hurricane Stan, which devastated Panajachel. Later, Blanca stopped working in the hotel and saw less of Paul. But her 9-year-old sister remained in the company of the Irishman.
Sí, después pasó el tiempo, él fue cambiando, mi hermana andaba casi todo el día con él, ya no estudiaba y regresaba hasta la noche.
At this point, more rumours built up about Paul and she was spending all day with the Irishman. And in this time, Paul bought a bike and paid for her dental work. Sometime later, came home in a distressed state and the family were concerned.
Llegó muy extraña esa noche.
¿En qué sentido?
No quiso hablar, solo llegó y se fue a acostar de un solo, ya no sintió cuando nosotros la movíamos y como que estaba paralizada todo el cuerpo.
That night the family took to the home of a relative who told the family she believed had been raped. ¿Por quién?
Por Paul, porque ella andaba mucho, o sea, casi todo el día se mantenía con él y no se sabía nada en el día de mi hermana y por eso se empezó a sospechar de él.
Después de eso, ¿qué hicieron?
Le dijeron a mi mamá que vaya a poner una denuncia a la policía, ella lo hizo, pero ella no estaba segura de que sí estaba violada la niña y no le preguntaron nada a ella. Y se puso la denuncia, empezó todo.
Stopped visiting Paul. On the other side of town, however, suspicions about Paul and other local girls continue to grow. Después de poner la denuncia, ¿qué pasó?
Pasaron muchas cosas, los policías venían a buscar a Paul acá en la casa, no estaba, la iban a buscar en la calle, yo creo que en la calle lo agarraron a él y lo llevaron a la cárcel.
After receiving evidence from International Justice Mission, investigators and lawyers, Guatemalan police arrested accused pedophile John Doe on June 10, 2006. Doe is accused of sexually abusing 2 young girls in Panajachel, Guatemala.
At this point, investigators and lawyers from the International Justice Mission based in Guatemala City arrived in Panajachel. They built up a case against the Irishman.
Y nos hablaron muchas cosas y, bueno, más a mi mamá le hablaban qué es lo que tenía que decir en cada debate que pasaba. Hasta le decían que tenía que inventarse cosas para que él quedara encerrado ahí para siempre.
What did you think about the allegations made against you against Milagros?
Just thought it so absurd.
¿Qué ofrecieron a tu mamá para que hable?
Una tortillería, un pequeño negocio para que empezara ahí a vender y sostener a la familia.
The IGM had opened up its first office in Guatemala the previous year, and what it said was a response to the high number of cases involving the sexual abuse of minors. Paul Farrell was the first high-profile investigation. Despite that Paul had been arrested for allegedly raping her family nevertheless visited him in jail, and in that time they started to question allegations against Paul.
But I do know somewhere along the way, I explained to the girls that one of the ways to stop this situation is for them to take back the denuncia, retract the denuncia, which they tried to do on 2 occasions and they were actually stopped.
¿Qué dijo tu mamá al juez?
Dijo que quería quitar la denuncia, que su hija la había mentido y ella lo creyó porque era su hija. Pero no, le dijeron que no se podía quitar la denuncia.
In the first hearing, the charges against Paul were upheld and he was sent to trial. He had no money and was appointed a public defender. On the other side was the International Justice Mission, working along with the Attorney General. Was their key witness and her testimony was central to the prosecution. What was she saying?
Taking off her underwear and I kissed her on the chest and I kissed her below and stuff like this.
So how did you feel when you heard these comments by being made against you?
Look, obviously I was upset. I just thought that's so untrue and why would she be saying that?
Paul was initially tried for alleged rape, but because a forensic doctor gave evidence that hymen had not been broken, the charge was changed to attempted rape. Paul was later convicted and sentenced to 4 years. The forensic doctor, in his testimony, added that he didn't believe had shown the outward signs of a molested girl. Another psychologist, however, said she believed had been raped by Paul Farrell. The appeal pointed to serious errors in the prosecution's case against Paul. It overturned the conviction and ordered a retrial. However, the IGM appealed and Paul was put back in jail. How did you feel about going back to prison after being cleared of the crime?
Well, I was given the impression somewhere along the way that I would have been released until the new trial. But every time that there was any kind of appeal on my behalf, the IJM re-appealed and basically kept me there for their own means, for manipulation or to get me to say I was guilty for something I wasn't guilty of.
A human rights group, Fair Trials International, hinted at what it said was the unlawful detention of a man whose conviction had been overturned. Did you get any support while you were in prison?
Yeah, I got a lot of support from the ICPO, which is the Irish Commission for Prisoners Overseas, financially, morally, and also from the consulate. And the people from the embassy in Mexico were absolutely fantastic. They went above and beyond.
Almost 5 years after being initially convicted of the attempted rape of Paul was found innocent. His testimony was key to that result. Now 14, she told the court that nothing untoward had happened between her and the Irishman when she was a young girl. When you were back in Ireland, did you feel any stigma regarding the initial conviction against you for the attempted rape?
No, because as far as I was concerned, the trial was over and I got the result I wanted, and most of the people who were close to me knew about the decision. So as far as I was concerned, it was okay. But then my daughter's uncle rang up the grandmother and said, "Do you know that Paul was in prison for this?" Because the IJM had left a PDF up on the internet. So I felt like I'd gone back on trial again.
Paul was so angry he decided to take a libel case against the International Justice Mission. About a year later, they settled in his favour and paid out an undisclosed six-figure sum. Paul, how many years were you put behind bars for?
Almost 5 years. 1,734 days.
The International Justice Mission widely publicised the conviction of Paul Farrell as a success story of the programs in Guatemala. I approached the IGM for an interview for this investigation and they declined to comment. One legal official who worked on Paul's case said the Irishman was a victim of a broken justice system in Guatemala, but he refused to speak on camera, afraid he would lose his job. Another person counselled children who had been sexually abused. They said they weren't sure if Paul was innocent and so declined to speak. Paedophilia is a hideous crime, but to be wrongly convicted of this is as much a crime. The IGM say they seek to tackle injustice. For Paul Farrell, the International Justice Mission represent many lost years and a lifetime ahead living in the shadow of a hated crime.